Many people around the world were taken by surprise by Trump's presidential win, in large part because almost every major polling forecast favored Hillary Clinton to win. Shortcomings in polling, analysis, and interpretation led the public and the media astray. But Donald Trump's campaign hired a London-based analytics company, and that company got it right.
Matt Oczkowski was part of that team at Cambridge Analytica, and he is here with us now. Hey, man, good to see you.
Thanks for having me.
So congratulations, first of all.
Appreciate it.
Because you did something that a lot of people who get paid a lot of money to do were not able to see and do, which is you got this right. How did you do it?
We saw trends early on in this election that showed that who we thought was going to be a likely voter this election was wrong, both in public polling and even some of our internal polling. Most of the data we use to figure out who a likely voter is based on vote history. So if you look at Mitt Romney in 2012 or John McCain in 2008, you would assume that similar turnout for Republican would happen. The difference is Donald Trump is anything but a typical Republican, so the electorate just looks far different. Once we started to see ballots come in, absentee ballots and early voting, we noticed three major demographic shifts that were happening. One, African-American vote was down this year significantly. Two, Hispanic vote was increased a bit this year. And three, older rural vote was coming out at a much higher clip than we expected. After we re-rated our polling, it allowed us to see that a lot of these Midwestern Rust Belt states were 1 to 3 points closer than what most people thought.
Wow.
Yeah.
So give me some more specifics, because I find this really fascinating, because we talk to a lot of people about the polls, and you know, there's a lot of debate about whether the traditional way of polling even works nowadays. People don't pick up their phones, they have cell phones. I mean, how do you get in contact with people? So how are you able to identify that new voter?
Sure. The problem with polling isn't polling itself, it's the way that we conduct the polling. So we use a blended polling methodology, which is a blend of online, live dialer to cell phone, and then IVR, which is like calling landlines. And the biggest problem this year wasn't the fact we weren't able to reach people, it's that we were calling the wrong people. It was the fact that, like going back to the point about likely voters, when you're polling, you're taking a sample of all the likely voters in the electorate, but who we were sampling was much more of a typical RD scenario than it was a Donald Trump versus Hillary Clinton scenario. Once we figured that out and we were able to tweak our weighting, it showed a much rosier picture for Mr. Trump than previously thought.
You know what's interesting is that leading up to Election Day, we had Republican strategists here, we had Democratic strategists here, and I asked the question, Donald Trump on the campaign trail keeps telling his supporters and the media that there are people that are going to turn up and vote for him. People that have not been traditionally polled. And I asked strategist after strategist, could he be right? And everybody said, nah, he's not right, because the numbers are not showing that. And I was like, well, what numbers are you using that he's using? And clearly those folks came out and they supported him. And I wonder if you saw that it was because of the movement that he launched, or because they liked what he was saying, or a combination of both. And just to follow up to that is, those crowds we were seeing at those stadiums, did that have anything to do with it?
So I'm not a pundit, I'm a data guy, and what you're saying is reinforced by data. We saw this disenfranchised vote, particularly in rural areas, come out in droves this election. There were a few things we knew about Trump voters and how they differed from typical Republican voters, and one of them is they were even more rural than we expected them to be. And on Election Day, in some of these areas, they were 10% more rural than even we thought.
Wow.
Turnout in some of these counties in the panhandle of Florida and in southwestern Ohio came out at clips 20 to 35% above Mitt Romney was able to do in 2012.
And they hadn't voted before, right? Or had some of them voted in the past?
Well, they didn't vote in the last election anyway.
We'll say spotty voting records. People who maybe not have voted in the past or haven't voted in the last several election cycles. In a lot of turnout models that people would have, you wouldn't include those folks in there, because the common theory would be they haven't showed up before, why would they show up this time? And we knew around 8:30 Central Time when we were down in Texas, once Florida was going to be called, Florida was our linchpin state. We knew that things were going to tip if Florida came through. We felt good about Pennsylvania and Ohio 2 weeks before the election, and we knew that with getting Pennsylvania and Ohio, you had a clear map to pick up a bunch of other states, but Florida and those 29 votes were very important. At about 8:30, we knew that West Palm Beach, Broward County, and Miami-Dade were all yet to come in. But Trump had built such a lead up in these rural communities that she couldn't even catch up if she wanted to by that point.
So you must, how do you feel about modern day polling then? I mean, from what I'm getting from you is clearly other groups weren't as dynamic as you, the ability to sort of shift the way you do what you do.
I think What we do differently is the combination of polling and data science. So we're not a polling company, we're a data science company, and we use polling to inform our decision making for modeling. So every week we're conducting thousands of polls. At least 1,500 in every battleground state, and daily we're updating our modeling with this data to show an accurate picture of where the electorate stands that day. And our pure modeling looked a lot closer based on the weights we were applying than polling was. We showed a very rosy picture for Michigan late in the election cycle. One state that surprised us and everyone else was Wisconsin. I've done a lot of work in that state. I worked for Scott Walker for 3 years up there. Even I did not think that Wisconsin would come through. I thought it would be close, but it was just really interesting to see how these returns played out there. Polling is not dead. Polling is very important, but it's the methods in which we conduct polling that'll be interesting to track over the next few years.
So in 2008, Nate Silver became sort of the media darling of polling.
Totally.
He was actually closer than a lot of other polls in his odds of Hillary Clinton versus Donald Trump becoming the next president of the United States. But do you sense that that's going to be you, and people are going to have their eyes on you over the next 4 years?
Yeah, business must be pretty good right about now.
I don't know about that. I have a lot of respect for Nate, and I think throughout the election, I would tell people that we tracked pretty closely with Nate for most of it. We were giving probabilities of victory. Nate gave some really important caveats leading up to the election. He got into a little tiff with a HuffPo
with
reporter.
the HuffPo guy, Ryan Grimm, right?
And I agree with Nate. The odds of there was never been a time in this election where Hillary had 98% odds of winning this election.
I don't think did anybody really think that. And Nate, but see, HuffPo was saying that their data was showing that. What were they doing that you and Nate Silver weren't doing?
That's a good question. It probably has to do with some of their methodology. I also, in this industry, it's a blend of art and science, and I suspect they were putting a bit too much art and mixing it in with the science, which is political punditry in theory.
And let me ask you a quick question, because in our notes, it says that the debates were a turning point for Donald Trump. A lot of people felt that he didn't do well in the debates. What did your data show?
So, every debate told a different story. After the first debate, we saw a general decline in numbers for a number of reasons. But after the third debate is when we really saw the start of the uptick in the trend. That, combined with the FBI investigation reopening on the emails, really brought him to a level where it was getting close. So when go back to Nate, when he had him at 30%, we were climbing in the same trajectory that he was. And I'm not going to sit here today and say we knew exactly how this was going to unfold, but we knew it became probable, and we knew these trends could put these states in the right direction. And that's why we weren't probably as surprised as some other people when these things came through. So it made for a very interesting election night.
Yeah, we got to leave it here, but I just one last quick question.
Sure.
We talked to some Trump people the day of the election, and they were a little cautious, not as optimistic. Were you optimistic?
As a data guy, I'm always cautiously optimistic, just because you got to let the numbers speak for themselves. I'd say after Florida happened, I became very optimistic about the outcome of the election, but it was certainly an exciting time.
Awesome. Matt Oczkowski, thank you so much for stopping by.
Thank you for having me.
Well done. Congratulations.
Thank you.